As I continue my top 10 most influential games of all time, I must admit that number 9 and number 10 were a tad cliche, because Catan and Pandemic are considered gateway games, meaning if you were to ask 100 gamers, like, what games got you into the hobby, many of them would include Catan and Pandemic on their list. And to be totally honest, I rarely pull those off the shelf anymore. But I had to give credit where credit was due, which is why I started with those two. But now that those are out of the way, I can get to some of the more interesting and unique games. In fact, my number 8 game may be a game you've never played or even seen, and that is StarCraft, the board game. Before we head out over to the table to check it out, here's a little bit of a backstory. Back in 1999, I was getting heavy into PC games. I had spent most of my life playing console games, but it was about that time I got a little bit better PC, and thanks to the internet and a steady connection, well, a connection that can only be as steady when it sounds like this. I really should have given a trigger warning before that one, I'm sure. Some of my friends were starting to play games like Rise of the Triad and Half-Life 2, so I got in on those and played along with them. But after a while, I kind of got tired of FPSs and wanted to try something a little bit different. And a good friend of mine said, hey, you know what? You need to check out this thing called a real-time strategy game. And in fact, I've been playing this game called StarCraft. Now, I had not heard anything about this game. I didn't know what an RTS was, but I really wanted to check it out. It didn't take a lot of coaxing for me to go get a copy. In fact, this is the copy of the game that I picked up right here in around, 1999. In fact, look, it's interesting. If you look at what the requirements are for this game, this is pretty good. So back in 1999, what did you need to play StarCraft, the video game? Well, Windows 95, 99 or NT was acceptable. That was good. You needed 16 meg of RAM and 80 meg of hard drive space. But anyway, I got the game, absolutely loved it. I was playing online with my friends. I was playing solo. We were playing PvP. We were playing co-op. I spent many hours and many years really getting into this game. So let's fast forward a bit to 2007. My play group consisted of guys that played StarCraft with me many years ago. And I had already taught them the other games that I talked about previously, like Catan, Pandemic, etc. So when I saw Fantasy Flight Games had released StarCraft, the board game, I jumped on the chance to get it and play it. Now up to this point, I had only played CCGs and other board games that are a little bit lighter in scale. And I remember the first thing about this game that really got to me was the size of the rulebook. In fact, it went a little bit like this. Holy cow! How long is this rulebook? 45 pages.
Hey Marty, let's go check out that new show, Big Bang Theory. It's about to come on.
You mean the one about the nerds?
Yeah, that's the one. Come on, we gotta go watch it now.
All right, there's no way this show's gonna make it, and we need to get one of those digital video recording machines just so we can watch it whenever we want. I honestly felt I was not going to be able to understand how to play this game. And even if I did, how could I effectively teach my friends how to play? StarCraft was also the first game where I printed out player guides to help teach the game. Laminated, of course. And still to this day for game nights, we will still print out player guides for games we think that might be easier if somebody had a player reference right in front of them. Now, 15 years after I played this game, the rules of this game really aren't that difficult, but at that time, it was pretty difficult to me, but it introduced me to games that are a little bit more challenging, and I end up liking those over time. Well, with that in mind, let's get over to the table and check this out. But first, I must say that one of the things I love about StarCraft is the soundtrack. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to be playing music from the original soundtrack. And I know with that in mind, Blizzard is going to put a copyright notice on this video, but fine, go ahead. Or Activision Blizzard. Or is it Microsoft Activision Blizzard? This is StarCraft, the board game. designed by Corey Kaniska and Christian T. Peterson. In this game for 3 to 6 players, each player controls a faction out of 6 that belongs to one race of the 3, Terrans, Zerg, and Protoss. Each faction has a unique special victory condition, but all factions can win through victory points that are gained by controlling special areas on some of the planets. Players build units and base upgrades with the resources they gather from the planetary areas that they control, and gain access to additional unit types through those upgrades. So much like the video game, you have workers that are going to go out and collect gas and minerals that are spent to upgrade buildings, build units, and expand out into the galaxy. As you can see, the game came with some great miniatures for its time that represent the units and vehicles in the game, which for a new gamer like me just blew me away. I love playing Protoss, and there's nothing better than building a carrier and putting it on the enemy's doorstep and seeing the fear in their eyes, or playing as Terran and bringing out a siege tank, putting it into siege mode ready to decimate your enemy. At its core, this is an area control game where you gain control of planets through exploration and combat. Areas give you access to minerals, gas, and those ever important victory points. Collect resources, spend resources to make units, upgrade buildings, all for the goal of getting victory points. Now, there are a lot of other games that kind of follow that same formula, but the mechanism that really stood out to me in this game was the action selection and resolution. Each player has a set of order tokens. Starting with the first player, each player puts down one order token face down on the planet, forming a stack if necessary. This continues until all players have placed 4 orders. These orders are to build, which is how you add units, upgrades, and more buildings, to mobilize, which is how you move around the planets, or research, which is how you add new technologies to your combat deck and gain event cards. Starting with the first player, they resolve one of their tokens that is on top of any of the stacks. If they don't have a token on the top, then they draw an event card and play passes to the next player. This continues until all the order tokens are resolved. So that sounds simple enough, but let me explain what kind of tension this creates as you're putting down action tokens and resolving them. So if I'm the first player and I put down an order token, it's going to be at the bottom of that stack. So as others get stacked on top, I will not get to resolve that order token till everybody else has cleared theirs off top of mine. That means that as I'm placing tokens, maybe I want to hold off on that order till later in the round so I can have it closer to the top of the stack. And if I do end up at the bottom of the stack, then this creates a situation that, for example, let's say I wanted to mobilize in this planet right here. I wanted to move into this planet. And if I have a token on the bottom here, like I do right here, then I'm not going to be able to move there until this token right here is resolved. Well, I have no clue what that token is. So they could be coming in here also, and then there might be a combat that might have to be resolved, or maybe this person's just going to do a research and add some cards to their deck or get some new event cards. I have no idea. And that's what makes this game so good, because it adds a whole bluffing mechanic. There are these brain games that are going on during this entire phase of putting down the orders, then deciding how they're resolved. And there is nothing worse than, say, if I'm looking at the board and none of my tokens are on top, and I just have to draw an event card and pass, and then just wait until eventually one of my tokens is sitting on top so I can finally resolve it. That created so many memorable moments while playing this game. I remember playing with my friends, and as we put down tokens, sometimes you kind of smirk as you put one of your order tokens on top of somebody else, because maybe you think you know what they're going to do and you're going to try to stop them, or maybe it's just a straight out bluff and you're just going to make them fret over what you have done right there, and is it going to mess them up or not. Now, as I explain this, I'm sure some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, this is somewhat like another game maybe that I've played. And if that other game that you're thinking of is Forbidden Stars, well, you're right. Forbidden Stars was released in 2015 and takes place in the Warhammer 40k universe. But it's not just a retheme of StarCraft. Several major changes were made, such as victory conditions, tech trees, and combat. See, in StarCraft, when somebody ends up in the same space as someone else, combat will occur, and that takes place through using combat cards. Each of you is going to have a set of cards in your hand. You're going to draw some depending whether you're attacking or defending, and then you're going to play those cards. Those cards have values on them that tell their combat strength, and you know the health of each of the units, and if the combat strength exceeds the health, you knock them out. So it's pretty simple of just lining up your units, determining who's going to be on the front line, who's going to be in support, play some cards to do that, resolve it, and move on. Now, in Forbidden Stars, it's a little bit different in that dice are now involved. And in many combat games, dice are involved. Well, this is no different. There is still some card play, but in the end, both of you are going to be rolling dice to resolve the combat. Personally, I prefer the Forbidden Stars method because as we played StarCraft, we found it seemed like the attacker always had the advantage because they may have the right set of cards in their hand to be able to play for an attack where the defender may not be prepared at all. At least when you throw in the randomness of dice, even though you feel like the odds may be stacked against you if you're defending, you still have a shot if the dice just happen to go your way. That really wasn't the case in StarCraft. Another change I liked in Forbidden Stars was that the game was limited to 8 rounds. StarCraft was the first game any of me and my friends have played that lasted for a good length of time, which could be with 4 players up to 3 hours. And this game supports up to 6, so it can run for a long time. And it's really just a race to 15 points or being able to complete your special faction objective. Forbidden Stars kind of took care of that. You are racing for objectives in that game, and if you're the first to get the number of objectives that equals the number of players, you win the game. But after 8 rounds, if nobody has achieved that, then the person with the most objectives wins. This shortened the game by 1 full hour. StarCraft's suggested time play is 3 to 4 hours, whereas Forbidden Stars is only 2 to 3 hours. So even though there are some things of Forbidden Stars I like more, the one thing I like in this game is the theme. I'm just a bigger fan of StarCraft than I am of Warhammer 40k, and that comes from all those years of playing the video game, so it's very nostalgic to me. And with this game, the friends that I played with were the same ones I played the video game with, which just created some very memorable moments. You know, I still love StarCraft, and in 2010, when StarCraft II Wings of Liberty was released, I jumped all over it. In fact, here's a picture of Tony and I at GameStop on midnight release. And they released 2 more in those series, and of course I picked those up too. Then in 2017, Blizzard released StarCraft Remastered. I grabbed that, and I tell you, the first time I had pulled that game up and the music came on, the nostalgia wave just swept right over me. It was like I was back in the late 90s playing the game again. It just gave me such good feels. You know, I don't play the video game much anymore, but it still is on my hard drive in case I ever want to crank it up. And in much the same way, I haven't played the board game in over 10 years, but it will stay on my shelf. I will never get rid of it because of the memories it has. And also because right now, since it's out of print, it's worth a pretty decent amount of money on eBay. You know, in fact, several years after StarCraft the board game came out, I found out there was an expansion called Brood Wars, and I was very interested in getting this game. However, at that time, both the base game and this expansion had already been out of print. So of course you go on eBay and start looking around, and at that time, people were asking a lot more for that game, or way over MSRP than I was willing to pay. So I thought, well, it's a lost cause, at least I got the base game. Well, about 7 to 8 years ago, I remember I got a call from Tony, the co-host on the show, and he said, hey, I'm at a game store that is closing, and they're having a liquidation sale, 50% off everything. He said, I happened to look up on the top shelf, and there is a copy of Star Wars Brood Wars. Do you want it? I remember screaming yes into the phone, and he picked up the copy of that game for only like 25 bucks. And I remember to this day, him meeting me at the Hardee's fast food parking lot in Indian Trail, North Carolina, and handing me this. And if you can see, it's still in shrink. I have never opened this thing because, well, we haven't played the base game, so there was no need to. And come to find out, This is worth a lot of money on eBay, going upwards of $400 for new and shrink. You know, it's sad to say that I've lost touch with the two friends that I played StarCraft the video game with and StarCraft the board game. In fact, I've thought about maybe reaching out to them at some point in time and see if we can all get together from wherever they are and come back and play StarCraft again one night. And if they do that, that is what will make me open up the expansion Brood Wars and play it, because then at that time, the value of creating those new memories and everything will totally be worth it. So let me ask you, have any of you played StarCraft the board game or Forbidden Stars, which is also out of print? If so, let me know in the chat. Or are you a big fan of the video game? Because I'll always talk about the video game. Let's chat about that too. StarCraft the board game, my number 8 most influential game of all time. Come back for number 7, which is a game that introduces me to a mechanism I've grown to love, and that game was also the start of a very special friendship that I still cherish to this day. See you then.